Hey everyone, my name is Gautham Lal, and I work at a startup called Accelerator. So where I usually work with React. So I have the purpose of this talk is like I've been when I started learning React, that was like about 10 months ago. So in between I started reading about Vue. So if you search for React or other frameworks, you'll see the React versus Angular versus Vue articles everywhere. So I've been hearing about Vue for a while, so I wanted to try it out. And also on podcasts, everyone is like, okay, React Vue, React Vue. So on one of the episodes of Code Navy podcast, the guest was Sarah Drasner. She's one of the core team members of Vue. So after that episode, I was like, okay, I'll finally give it a try. So about 2 months ago, I started learning Vue, and so here I'll be talking about my journey for the last 2 months. And so in this, I'll be talking about mostly what all have I learned, a basic app that I built. And so the purpose of this talk is like for the beginners, you'll get a new perspective as to how maybe a path that you could take, and for the more experienced people, you could get a new perspective on Vue maybe. So I've been told that my rate of speech is pretty fast. So and it's like afternoon lunchtime. So if I go too fast and you're not able to like grasp what I'm saying, just shout what, and I'll stop. And if this type of word doesn't work, you can do the stone cold style what. So like what or what, any way you want. Alright, cool. So I started with the basics. So I didn't start off with the Vue CLI immediately because I thought I'll start with because that's a lot of overhead, I believe. So I thought I'll just start with the simple Vue CDN and start with the Vue instances, build small scale applications using Vue instances. So I started with the string interpolation, started first, the very first program we all make, hello world, did that, then use the data property to store some value, and then increment it or decrement it, like simple stuff like that. Then moved on to directives. So directives like one of my favorite things about Vue. So it gives you, Vue provides you some attributes that you could use with your HTML elements. And some of my favorites are the ones that I use a lot is vbind. If you want to provide a data property to your attributes, the default HTML attributes. vmodel is for two-way binding, so especially useful when creating forms. You can directly type something and change your data properties. von for events, we need events like mouse click, mouse hover, all of that. And v4 like your basic for loop. And then string interpolation is great for great for simple one lines expressions, but when it gets multi-line, when it gets complex, you need to move that piece of logic to somewhere else, and that's where methods are useful. So methods are your basic your normal functions, methods. And you could call them using von inside the event listener. And then computed and watches are great as well. This is something new that I've learned while using Vue, and one of my favorite things about Vue. Computed, especially because it lets you cache your result and avoids having to run a method again and again and again, and only when the reactive source that you're using changes. And watches, you can use watches to listen to a change to any particular property. So after I got the basics done, I moved on to building apps. So while learning React, I learned React through FreeCodeCamp. So they have a lot of front-end library projects. So I thought I learned the projects there helped me a lot in like getting React to the ground. So I thought I'll use that here as well with in the case of Vue. So I'd recommend using if any of your beginners, I'd recommend building some applications from the front-end library projects on FreeCodeCamp. So I built. Here I'll be talking about the Pomodoro Clock. So it's based on the Pomodoro time management technique. Are you all aware of it? The Pomodoro time management technique. Okay, I'll just tell you anyway. So it's like Pomodoro time management technique. It's like you work on based of intervals. So first, for example, if I set a 20-minute session, I work for the 20-minute session. Then the bell rings, then you take a break for 5 minutes or the next break session. So this is incredibly useful for us because we sit and work for like hours and our back gets damaged. So this is incredibly useful for us. We can take in breaks in between 5 minutes. And also for pair programming sessions, a lot of people use Pomodoro clocks for that. So in the beginning I used only Vue instances, a simple Vue instance to manage everything. So I'll show you the code now. Alright, wait, I'll show you the application as well. So this is the session that I create, clock that I created. Here I can manage the break length, so I can increase it, decrease it. Same with session. So the session starts first, then the break starts, and then you click the go and then starts reducing. So once the timer is 0, an alarm will ring and the break session will start working. Will start. So I'll show you the code. So the HTML is over here. So these are the different blocks. This is the block for the break. Block. Okay, sorry. Better? More? Alright. So this is the block for the break. A block for the session. This one, where I'm displaying the session length and all. And this is for the timer. Cool. And so I stored the initial state as a separate function because I'll have to reset my state. I'll just show you here. Timer is going on right now. I can reset it and everything will go back to where it was. So because of that, I stored the session separate, the initial state separately in a function, and which returns an object. And here I'm using that. So here I'll get the initial state. I created a bunch of methods for incrementing the break, decrementing, same for session, the timer, and this is for starting and pausing the timer, where I'm using a set interval to decrease the value of the time by 1 after every second. And here I am resetting the whole timer. And in the computer property, this value is being computed based on the timer values. Alright, I'll just reduce it, and then because you won't be able to hear the alarm, I'll just reduce it. So I created this kind of like style thing where when there's less than 1 minute left, the whole thing changes to red, like a countdown kind of thing. Alright, so moving on, I also created a watcher just for that session length. Yeah, the CSS over here in a separate file. So let's move on. So while instances are great, but feel like everything becomes a bit jumbled up, like everything is over there, over here. So I moved on to components. Components are great, especially because it lets you manage the code based on logic and functionality. So over in Vue, components are basically Vue instances. So they let you reuse, they are reusable Vue instances. So you could use a component again and again. And it, like I said, it lets you manage the code based on logic and functionality. You can divide the code and logic on based on logic and functionality. So and over here it's characterized by template and logic. So the data flows from logic to template. So the data stored in template, sorry, in the logic, that's the alarm from the clock. So now the break session is going on, as you can see. So I'll just reset it now, you know how it works. Alright. Yeah, and the events are emitted from template, and they manipulate the data stored in the logic. So this is something that a video that I saw, like which helped me relate to components. Just play it. Wait. So the components were broken in pieces, and Vue brings them all together like alchemy, and you get one whole piece. So that's how I like to think it in my mind. Like that's what is going on in the background. So if you watch it, if you watch this show, you would get it. Okay, now one of the key differences between instances and components is that the data property must be a function. So over here, the data is an object because it's being returned by a function, still an object. So now I'll move on to component. Alright. Here the data is a function. The same thing, I stored it in a separate function, but I'm making it return inside another function. That's all. And yeah, so data can be passed from from a parent to child as props. Props is short for properties, as you know, and so these are the different blocks that I create, different components that I created. One for break, one for session, basically the same, and timer. So I copied the template from here and pasted it in separate components. And I'm receiving the props here in all of them. All of the value data properties are stored over here, like before, and I pass them to the child component like this. The break length is sent like this. The methods to increment and decrement the length, and same with sessions, and same with timer. So one of the main things I said was components are reusable, but over here I have, wait, you could see these two are basically the same. You could see, so I have a chance to reuse a single component. So I went ahead and did that. I created a common component over here where I'm now passing the type, and I change the name of the props to a more simple terms, length, decrement, and I'm passing it. Wait, I'll just comment this out. Yeah. And, the one of the main things, another advantage of using components is that you get access to the Vue's developer tools. So now it's pretty simple to see the blocks here. So now you can see these two are the same. These two have the same components. These two are the same components. Earlier it was different, but I'll have to go back to show that. Just 1 second. Now you can see this is a separate component, app break, while this is an app session. So by changing that, I could reuse a piece of code. So that was components. So another thing, I passed methods as props here. You could also use events. You could emit an event on a while for a on for on click, for example. But that's something I didn't use here. I prefer to use methods as props. There's another thing called event bus, something I was trying to use. I'll try to put that in later on, and maybe in the future I could speak about event buses. So in conclusion, so I've been working with the React way for the last 10 months basically. So it forced me to think out of the React way, and out of the box state management I've thought in Vue is better or more easier to use. So for example, I created this small snippet on JS Fiddle. Is it visible? So just 1 second. So you can see here, for a simple thing like just writing a name, yeah, like my name over here, and then displaying it here, I had to create a method, then call it. You want to listen to the event handler, then call the function, and then use a set state to change the state so that it will get visible over here. This is in React. While in Vue, it's much like basically nothing actually. Like I just have to create a Vue model and listen to that. It's so much more simpler and cleaner and easier. So this is something that I thought was much better in a Vue. Also in in React, a lot of the things are asynchronous. Like even in set state, you have to create a callback and then do the something after you have changed the state. While in Vue, you can write whatever logic you want to do after you have changed the value. So so that's something I really liked about Vue. So another thing that I really liked is computer and watches. Like I said earlier, computer is wonderful, especially if you have a huge method, and you don't have to re-execute it every time. Instead, only when the reactive sources, the data properties that you use in them change, only then the method gets re-executed. And in watches is useful in case where example, if you're listening to watching a property, for example, and then when A changes, you want to change B, for example. So for like such situations, watches are really good and they're really useful. So that's all, and I'm looking forward to explore more with Vue. And thank you. And you can follow me on Twitter at MightyGL and on GitHub at Gautham Lal. So you can like guess which account I made when I was in 10th standard. And I write a blog where I write about what I am learning on side by side. It's called a Vue blog, and so I can see like how creative I am also on naming things and so on. This is the link, and that's all. Thank you. Any questions? Something?
So anything you could explain about component to component communication? Any issues you faced?
Any issues I faced? It's like passing props. It seems it's pretty similar to React. So that way I haven't faced any problem. While emitting events, I've faced a bit more issues because that's not something I've used in React that much, right? So while passing methods as props and all, it's something that I use in React, so it was pretty easy for me to grasp. While like I said, event buses, that's something I want to use more and also Redux and Vuex. I haven't learned Vuex yet. While I use Redux, but I think it's a bit complex. Like setting up is a bit complex, but after that it's very easy. But I feel that people overuse Redux sometimes. Like for every single thing we are using Redux, everything they're stored in the main state. So while saving state is, I think, is much easier in Vue. So let's see if I like emitting events is what I want to get a better grasp on. That's
Any useful resource you would recommend for beginners?
so I am learning from a Udemy course by Max. Yeah, that's the course that I'm using, and the Vue docs I highly recommend. I use both of them. I watched one of his videos, then I read the Vue docs on it. So the Vue docs are incredible. So those two are the resources that I use mostly.
Thank you.
So can you throw more light on React versus Vue?
Yeah.
What are the pain points in React which are not there in Vue? What's your pain points in Vue which are not there in React? Just to get that.
Sorry, I didn't catch you.
I mean, what works better in Vue and what doesn't? So identify pain points in React which are not there in Vue.
Yeah.
And vice versa, so that you people can get a sense of what.
Yeah. I also the lifecycle methods. I haven't used much. I haven't got what do you say, an opportunity to use them on Vue yet. So I use all lifecycle methods all the time on React. So once I use that, I could talk about that more. So one of the reasons why set state is available in what do you say, in React is like because whenever we use set state, all the lifecycle methods are called in the background. So that's like if you directly manipulate the state, the lifecycle methods are not called, and hence a re-render never occurs. So that's something that I learned while checking out why React does this in a different way. While Vue assumes that why if you're trying to change the state, that means you want to try to change the state. So if you're changing the state directly, they're like, okay, you are changing the state, that must mean you need a re-render, and does it automatically. So things like that are different I've seen. And while coding, the templates and all, I feel, and the approach, like for example, this file .vue, you got everything over here. It's very beautifully divided into template, script, and style. While in React also you could do that, but I feel it's a bit cumbersome. Then you get into CSS and JS, and then that's a bit more headache. And also class binding and style binding is a bit more better in in Vue, I think. That's all. Thank you.